After my son came home from school with tears streaming down his face, my mother looked at me and asked whether the $1,800 she'd given him hadn't been enough to solve the problem. $1,800? I repeated. The second those words left my mouth, she froze and didn't say another thing. That was when we discovered my girlfriend had been taking every dollar and spending it on brand new clothes for her own daughter instead. About 30 minutes later, she showed up at my front door. She walked inside, and what happened next left every single one of us stunned. When Caleb came home crying that afternoon, I figured I was dealing with some school bully. Never in a million years did I imagine I was about to uncover something much worse. I was about to learn that the woman sharing my bed had been stealing from my own child. My name is Ethan. I'm 36 years old, and I drive a taxi around Cleveland for a living. Most of my adult life has been spent pulling double shifts because I never wanted my 8-year-old son, Caleb, to experience the kind of uncertainty I grew up with. I'm not some wealthy guy. You'll never catch me wearing expensive suits or sitting behind a desk in some fancy office. Most days, my hands carry the smell of a steering wheel, stale gas station coffee, and the citrus cleaner I use to wipe down the back seat after airport pickups. But one thing I've always known how to do is work hard. I've learned how to turn $40 into enough groceries to keep us fed for 4 days. I figured out how to squeeze one more weekend out of a worn-out tire with a quick repair. I've learned to smile politely at drunk passengers, bite my tongue while businessmen act like they're better than me, and still have enough energy left when I get home to help my son study his spelling words. More importantly than any of that, I know my kid. So when Caleb walked through the front door that Tuesday with his backpack hanging off one shoulder and his face already falling apart, I knew immediately this wasn't an ordinary rough day. He let his backpack slam onto the floor so hard that one of his folders slid halfway out. I stepped out of the kitchen and said, "Hey, buddy, what happened?" He looked up at me with red, watery eyes that were trying not to cry. "I hate this school." The second I heard that, my chest tightened. "Who did something to you?" He shook his head, nodded right after, and then the tears finally broke loose. It was the kind of crying kids do after they've spent the whole day trying to keep it together until they just can't anymore. I dropped down onto one knee so I was looking him in the eye. "Caleb, talk to me." He rubbed his face with the side of his hand before quietly saying, "They said I'm a liar." "Who said that?" "Mrs. Carter, and Logan, and Sophie. Everybody." My stomach instantly sank. "About what?" He took a shaky breath before answering. "About the shoes." I frowned. "What shoes?" "The ones Grandma said I was going to get." For a moment, I simply stared at him, trying to make sense of what I just heard. "Grandma? Who?" He blinked at me like I'd asked the dumbest question imaginable. "Your mom." I slowly stood back up. My mother, Margaret, had always loved spoiling Caleb in little ways. She'd slip him $20 here, $50 there, sneak him too many cookies before dinner, or surprise him with an action figure he definitely didn't need. But whenever it came to anything expensive, she always talked to me first. Always. "What exactly did Grandma tell you?" I asked carefully. Caleb sniffled. "She said she gave money so I could get new clothes and new shoes because mine are getting too small." He paused before continuing. "Then today Mrs. Carter asked me in front of the whole class if I was making things up because I told Logan Grandma was buying me the black Nikes and a winter coat. Logan said that couldn't be true because I've been wearing the same jacket every day since October." His voice cracked on that last word. A cold feeling ran straight down my back. "Who told Mrs. Carter about it?" "I don't know. Logan kept saying I always make stuff up because I told him I was getting new shoes this week. And I didn't." He lowered his eyes to his sneakers. The front of the left shoe had split open again. I'd already glued it back together twice just to make it last a little longer. "I thought we really were." I knelt down again and rested both of my hands on his shoulders. "Listen to me. You are not a liar. Do you understand me?" He nodded. "Look at me, buddy." He slowly lifted his eyes. "You didn't do anything wrong." His lower lip started trembling. Then, "Why didn't I get them?" That question hit me harder than any punch I'd ever taken. I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could say a single word, someone knocked on the still-open front door. My mother walked in carrying a casserole dish covered with aluminum foil. The smile on her face disappeared the second she saw Caleb standing there. "Oh no," she said softly. "What happened?" Caleb wiped his cheeks with his sleeve and hurried down the hallway to his room. Mom watched him disappear before turning to me. "Ethan, what money?" I asked. She frowned. "What? The money you gave Caleb." "What money?" The expression on her face changed immediately. I'd known that woman my entire life. I'd seen her angry, proud, worried, smug, insulted, exhausted, a little tipsy, and after my dad passed away, completely broken by grief. But I'd never seen her go silent the way she did right then. She didn't look confused. She didn't look blank. She looked like someone had unplugged every thought in her head. She carefully placed the casserole dish on the table in the hallway with both hands. "Ethan," she said slowly, "don't tell me." "What money?" I repeated. She glanced toward Caleb's bedroom before lowering her voice. "I gave Olivia $1,800. 2 weeks ago." I just stood there staring at her. "Olivia, my girlfriend. For Caleb," Mom continued, speaking slower with every word. "For winter clothes, school shoes, a proper coat. She told me you were uncomfortable accepting help directly, so I gave the money to her instead." The kitchen clock suddenly sounded so loud it was almost ridiculous. A short laugh escaped my mouth. It wasn't because anything was funny. It was pure disbelief. "You gave Olivia $1,800, I said slowly. "For my son." Mom had gone completely pale. She told me she'd already picked everything out. She even said Caleb wanted name-brand sneakers because the other kids were making fun of him. A few days later, I asked Olivia whether Caleb liked everything. She smiled and said he was thrilled. I had no reason to doubt her. Her jaw tightened. I thought she'd already bought everything. Right there in the hallway, I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, even though I already knew the answer. Not 1 cent of that $1,800 had ever come through me. Then I opened the shared grocery list Olivia and I used sometimes. After that, I scrolled through our text messages. Nothing. There wasn't a single message about my mother. Nothing about any money. Nothing about Caleb needing clothes. Then a memory slammed into me so hard my head actually jerked. 3 days earlier, Olivia had been on FaceTime with her 13-year-old daughter, Haley, from her previous relationship. Haley lived with Olivia's ex during the school week in another county. I suddenly remembered Olivia smiling into her phone and saying, "I told you I'd take care of it. Go ahead and get the boots too." At the time, I hadn't given those words a second thought. Now I looked straight at my mother. "When exactly did you give her the money?" "The Friday before last." Another memory clicked into place. That same weekend, Olivia had walked through the front door carrying 3 glossy shopping bags. She casually tossed the receipts into the trash. I'd noticed a pink sweater sticking halfway out of one of the bags and figured she'd either found something cheap for herself or bought something for Haley with her own money. I never bothered asking. I had absolutely no reason to. Until now. Mom slowly covered her mouth with her hand. "Oh my God." I walked over to the trash can beneath the kitchen sink, even though I knew it had already been emptied twice since that day. It was a pointless search. After that, I headed into the bedroom Olivia and I shared and pulled open the second dresser drawer. The one where she tossed random receipts, makeup samples, coupons, and all kinds of little junk. My mother came in behind me. There they were. Receipts from a department store, a children's boutique, and a shoe store. None of the items were for boys. Every purchase was for girl sizes: boots, sweaters, jeans, hair accessories. I stood there staring at those receipts while a cold, ugly certainty settled deep inside my chest. Mom only glanced at them before dropping onto the edge of the bed like her legs had given out. "She spent it on Haley," she whispered. "Yes," I answered quietly. "The money you gave for Caleb." "Yes." She looked straight at me. I turned toward her. "Why would you hand her that much money without saying a word to me?" She winced. "That's a fair question." The truth was, My mother had one flaw that had followed her my entire life. She believed people who sounded confident. If someone spoke calmly, acted organized, and carried themselves like they had everything under control, she'd trust them without asking enough questions. That's exactly how my dad managed to hide his gambling debts for years. It's how my older cousin borrowed money he never paid back. And now it was how Olivia had taken $1,800 meant for my son and quietly redirected it to her own daughter. Mom lowered her eyes to her hands. "She told me you were too proud to accept help," she said softly. "She said you didn't want Caleb knowing money was tight. She told me she was protecting your dignity." I let out another laugh. This one sounded bitter. "My dignity? I know." Her eyes filled with tears. Most people probably think that's the moment I picked up the phone and started screaming at Olivia. I didn't. Instead, I walked down the hall to Caleb's room. He was sitting on his bed exactly as he'd been before, still wearing his school clothes and holding the faded blue blanket he'd slept with since preschool. He looked up the second I walked in. "Did I do something bad?" he asked in a tiny voice that almost shattered me. I sat down beside him. "No," I said. "But an adult did." He looked at me for a second. "Am I still getting new shoes?" "Yes," I answered without even thinking. That part wasn't negotiable. I'd skip my own meals if I had to before I'd let him spend one more day walking around in those split-open sneakers. He studied my face carefully. "You look mad." "I am." "At me." "Never at you." He leaned against me, small, warm, and completely trusting. I wrapped my arm around him and stared at the closet door while counting backward from 10, trying to keep myself from completely losing it. That evening, my mother took Caleb to her house for dinner so, as she put it, I could deal with things. She kept repeating words like calm and controlled. Meanwhile, I was one bad decision away from dragging Olivia's dresser out onto the balcony and throwing it over the railing. She usually got home around 6:30. At exactly 6:27, I arranged every receipt neatly across the coffee table. Next to them, I placed a legal pad. Across the top, in large block letters, I wrote, "Where is Caleb's money?" Then I sat down on the couch and waited. When I finally heard the key turn in the lock, I didn't move an inch. Olivia walked inside carrying a fast food bag in one hand and her purse over her shoulder. She stopped the moment she saw me. "Oh," she said, "you're home early. I canceled my evening shift." Her eyes drifted toward the coffee table. "What's all this?" I didn't answer. She slowly set the food on the kitchen counter. "Ethan?" I pointed toward the couch. "Sit." A faint smile appeared on her face. It was the kind of smile manipulative people give when they think you're bluffing. "Excuse me?" "The money my mother gave you for my son," I said evenly. "Sit down and explain where it went." For just a split second, something flashed across her face. Then it disappeared. "Your mother's being dramatic." Oddly enough, hearing that actually calmed me down. The second a liar commits to denying the truth, everything usually becomes easier. They don't apologize. They start rewriting the story. "Sit," I repeated. She stayed exactly where she was. "First of all, don't talk to me in that tone. Then answer the question." "She gave me some money, yes?" $1,800. Olivia shrugged one shoulder. "If that's how much it was." "If that's how much it was?" I repeated. "Try again." She folded her arms across her chest. I was going to replace it. I just stared at her. She knew I'd figured everything out. But people like Olivia always mistake silence for surrender. So she kept digging herself deeper. "Haley needed things right away. Her father is behind on child support again. Her winter clothes were old, and your mother wanted to help the family. Haley is part of this family too." "No," I said. Her jaw tightened. "Wow." "No," I repeated louder this time. "My mother handed you that money for my son. She didn't give you permission to play hero for your ex and buy your daughter expensive boots. They weren't designer." I actually laughed. "That's seriously the argument you're making?" Olivia stepped toward me. "You don't understand what it's like." "Really?" You have Caleb with you every single day. You always know what he needs. I only get Haley on weekends. Sometimes I have to make sure she knows I'm there for her. With my son's money? It was temporary money, she snapped. I was going to put it back once She stopped talking, opened her mouth, closed it again, then finally said, "That's not even the point." "It is exactly the point." She threw her purse onto the chair. "You want the truth? Fine." She took a breath. I was embarrassed. Haley asked why Caleb gets to live here all the time while she has to split her time between houses. She notices everything. She notices when you buy Caleb little treats but not her because she isn't here full-time. I just wanted, one time, for my daughter to have the better things. There it was. Not desperation. Not survival. Not necessity. Competition. I slowly stood up. "So you stole from an 8-year-old because you wanted your daughter to have nicer stuff." Her face immediately turned red. "Don't twist my words." "I don't have to twist anything. You always make everything about Caleb." The room fell completely silent. Even she seemed to realize what she just admitted. I took one slow breath. "Yes," I said, "because I'm his father." She rolled her eyes like I was the unreasonable one. "And I'm Haley's mother." "Then steal from somebody else." Her head snapped back. "Excuse me? You heard me." She jabbed a finger toward my chest. "Don't talk to me like I'm some criminal." I pointed at the receipts spread across the coffee table. "You accepted $1,800 under false pretenses and spent every dollar on someone else." "What exactly would you call that?" Her nostrils flared. "I live here. I cook here. I clean here. I've helped raise your son for the last 2 years. Then you should have cared enough not to let him be humiliated at school." That finally hit her. She blinked. "What?" Caleb came home crying. For the first time that evening, something changed in her expression. It wasn't guilt. Not really. It looked less like guilt and more like she was annoyed that the consequences had suddenly become inconvenient. "I didn't know anything about what happened at school," she said. "You didn't know because you never bothered to ask." I shot back. "You were too busy buying boots and hair accessories." She threw her hands up. "Oh my God, Ethan. Stop acting like I bought Haley a Mercedes. It was just some clothes." Caleb got called a liar. For the first time that entire conversation, Olivia looked away. That was all I needed to see. I walked over to the hallway closet, grabbed the small overnight duffel bag she always used when she spent weekends with Haley, and tossed it onto the couch. Her head whipped around. "What are you doing?" "You're leaving." She actually laughed. "No, I'm not." I unzipped the bag. "Then I'll pack your things nice and slow so you can watch. You can't throw me out over an argument." "This isn't an argument." I looked her right in the eyes. "This is the end." That finally got her moving. "Ethan." "No." She hurried around the couch, and suddenly her voice became soft and sweet. "Baby, listen. We can fix this." I stared at her like I was looking at a complete stranger. Maybe I was. "Fix what?" I asked. "The theft? The lies? Or the part where my son came home ashamed because he believed an adult who promised him something?" She reached for my arm. I stepped backward before she could touch me. That seemed to shake her more than anything else. "Ethan, don't do this over one mistake." "One mistake?" I shook my head. "No. Forgetting to buy milk is a mistake. Saying something hurtful during an argument is a mistake. This took planning. You lied to my mother. You accepted the money. You hid the receipts. And when I confronted you, the very first thing you did was try to make it sound like it wasn't a big deal." Her expression hardened. "So that's it? After everything I've done for this house?" I nodded toward the duffel bag. "Pack." The next 10 minutes were ugly. First she cried. Then she started yelling. After that, she accused me of never caring about Haley. A minute later, she claimed I was cruel for making a woman leave at night. Then she insisted my mother had always hated her. Finally, she threatened to tell everyone I'd become controlling. I barely responded to any of it. I simply opened drawers, handed her everything that belonged to her, and kept my emotions completely shut down. Eventually she realized I wasn't changing my mind. She zipped up the duffel bag, dragged it toward the front door, and stopped before walking out. "This is going to traumatize Caleb," she said. I looked at her calmly. "No. What traumatizes children is teaching them someone can steal from them, and they're still supposed to smile and pretend everything's okay." She opened the door, paused, then looked back at me. "You're going to regret humiliating me." I glanced one last time at the receipts spread across the coffee table. "You humiliated yourself." Then I closed the door behind her. For the first time in months, my apartment actually felt honest. I wish that had been the end of the story. It wasn't. People like Olivia rarely leave quietly when they think they can still control how everyone else sees them. By 8:30 that night, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Her sister texted to tell me I was heartless. Her friend Jenna sent, "You seriously kicked a woman out over kids' clothes?" One mutual friend even left me a voicemail saying I needed to show more compassion because blended families are complicated. Not one of them mentioned the missing $1,800. That told me everything. Olivia had already rewritten the story before she'd even driven out of my parking lot. Driving a taxi teaches you something about dealing with people who insist they're perfectly sober when they're obviously not. You don't argue. You stick to the facts. So that's exactly what I did. I photographed every receipt. Then I took a picture of the handwritten note my mother had tucked inside the birthday card with the cash envelope she'd given Olivia. It read, "Use this for my grandson. Coat, shoes, whatever he needs. Love, Grandma." After that, I sent one group message to every single person who had contacted me. Olivia accepted $1,800 from my mother specifically to buy school clothes and shoes for my 8-year-old son. She spent the money on her own daughter instead. Today my son was humiliated at school because he honestly believed those clothes were coming. She is no longer welcome in my home. There is nothing else to discuss. Then I turned my phone off. Around 9 that evening, my mother brought Caleb home. He walked through the door carefully, the way kids do when they can tell the mood inside a house has changed. Before he could ask anything, I knelt down in front of him. "Olivia isn't going to live here anymore." His eyes immediately grew wide. "Because of me?" There it was again. That heartbreaking habit children have of believing every disaster must somehow be their fault. "No," I said firmly. "Because of the choices she made." He thought quietly for a few seconds. "Are you sad?" I could have lied. But kids know when you're lying. "A little," I admitted. "And I'm mad." He nodded slowly. "Me too." Then he asked something that made me realize just how much he'd noticed over the last 2 years. "Can we still get pizza on Fridays?" Despite everything, I smiled. "Yeah, buddy. We can still get pizza on Fridays. Even though she's gone." I paused. "Actually, especially because she's gone." For the first time all day, he smiled. The next morning, before dropping him off at school, I took him to a discount store. We bought 2 pairs of jeans, new socks, a winter coat that happened to be on clearance, and the black sneakers he'd been dreaming about. The total pushed my checking account into territory I really didn't want to see. I didn't care. Standing at the register, Caleb kept looking down at the shoes like they might disappear if he blinked. "You sure?" he asked quietly. "I'm sure." When he walked into school wearing those new sneakers, I noticed his shoulders sitting a little straighter. He looked proud again. You'd think that would have been enough. But betrayal doesn't stop hurting just because the practical problem gets solved. Replacing the money was easy compared to dealing with everything else. The deeper wound came from realizing how many warning signs I'd ignored, how many little moments I'd brushed aside, how many times Olivia quietly made Caleb feel like he came second, how often she'd shift attention or resources toward Haley while calling it fairness, when in reality it was just favoritism dressed up with nicer words. Once I started looking backward, I couldn't stop seeing it. The school event she skipped because Haley might want to FaceTime. The way she'd complain when I bought Caleb a new pair of cleats but had no problem spending plenty on Haley's birthday shopping. All those little comments I'd barely noticed at the time. Caleb has you all week. Haley deserves a little extra while she's here. Back then, I'd convinced myself I was being mature by compromising. Now I understood what had really been happening. She'd been training me to accept an unfair balance little by little. 3 days later, my mother came over carrying a couple of envelopes. Her expression was as hard as stone. "What's that?" I asked. She handed one to me, a cashier's check. I looked down. $1,800. You shouldn't have to wait for her to pay it back. I looked from the check back to my mother. "Mom, take this back." "I will," she said, "but only if you stop blaming yourself." She gave me a small, bitter smile. "I think that's going to take a while." I laid the check on the kitchen table. "She lied to you." "She did." Mom sighed. "But I'm still the one who handed her the money." She sat down and slowly looked around the apartment. "Your father used to do something like this," she said quietly. "Not involving children, but with stories." He'd explain everything so calmly, so reasonably, that by the time I realized I'd been manipulated, the damage had already been done. As she spoke, she absent-mindedly rubbed a small spot on the kitchen table with her thumb. "I thought I'd gotten smarter." "You did," I told her. "That's exactly why this hurts so much." Her eyes watered, but she blinked the tears away before they could fall. "How's Caleb doing?" "Better," I said. "Still quiet, though. And he's watching me very closely." She gave a slow nod. "Kids learn from what we choose to tolerate." That sentence stuck with me. Kids learn from what we choose to tolerate. Later that afternoon, Caleb was sitting at the kitchen table doing his homework when someone knocked on the front door. I looked through the peephole. Olivia. For a second, I considered pretending I wasn't home. Then I noticed she wasn't by herself. My mother stood near the curb with her arms crossed. Caleb's teacher, Mrs. Carter, was standing on the walkway looking completely confused. And farther back, near the sidewalk, Haley stood beside her father. I opened the door but stayed in the doorway so no one could walk in. "What is this?" I asked. "I asked everyone who deserved the truth to come," Olivia said quietly. Olivia looked exhausted. Her face was blotchy. She wasn't wearing any mascara, and she held a plain white envelope tightly in both hands. "I need to talk to you." "No." She swallowed hard. "Please." Behind me, I heard footsteps. Caleb had come into the hallway. I turned toward him. "Go wait in your room for a minute, buddy." He hesitated but finally nodded. Then I faced Olivia again. "You've got 30 seconds. What happened next caught me completely off guard. She didn't argue. She didn't make excuses. She didn't start crying. Instead, she stepped inside just far enough to clear the doorway. Then she turned not toward me, but toward the hallway where Caleb was still standing, half hidden around the corner. Slowly, she lowered herself onto both knees. My mother actually gasped. Olivia carefully placed the white envelope on the floor in front of her as though it weighed 100 pounds. "Caleb," she said, her voice shaking, "I lied. The money your grandma gave me was supposed to be for you. I spent it on someone else. That was wrong. What happened at school happened because of me. Not because of you. Because of me." The apartment became completely silent. Even Haley, still standing outside beside her father, looked stunned. Tears finally rolled down Olivia's face, but for once her words came without excuses. "You were telling the truth. You are not a liar. I embarrassed you." After I left your apartment, Haley asked me why Caleb never got the shoes Grandma paid for. I couldn't answer her. For the first time, I heard what I'd done through my own daughter's eyes. "And I'm so sorry." I glanced over at my mother. She had both hands covering her mouth. Mrs. Carter shifted awkwardly on the front porch, obviously realizing she'd just walked into something far bigger than a normal parent-teacher conversation. Olivia gently pushed the envelope closer toward Caleb. "It's all there. The full 1,800. And another 400. I sold one of my bracelets. And one of my handbags." She looked up at me for only a second before turning back to Caleb. I also called your teacher and explained exactly what happened. Mrs. Carter cleared her throat from the doorway. I did receive that call. Olivia gave a small nod. And I told Haley the truth too. Outside, Haley stared down at the ground, her cheeks bright red with embarrassment. Her father rested a comforting hand on her shoulder. Olivia took another shaky breath. I came here because apologizing to adults wasn't enough. I needed to apologize to the person I actually hurt. That was the moment that surprised everyone. Not because what she did was noble, because it was the first completely honest thing I'd ever heard her say without trying to protect herself. Caleb stood frozen. Then he looked over at me. Do I have to say anything? I smiled gently. No. You don't have to do anything. He looked back at Olivia for several long seconds. Finally, with the simple honesty only an 8-year-old can have, he asked, Why didn't you just spend your own money? Olivia slowly closed her eyes. There wasn't a single answer that could make her look any better. I was selfish, she admitted. Caleb nodded quietly, almost like he'd finally solved a puzzle he'd been working on. Then he simply said, Okay. After that, he turned around and walked back to his room. That one quiet okay hit harder than any shouting ever could have. Olivia stayed on her knees for another few seconds. Maybe because standing up meant facing the reality of what she'd done. Eventually, she got to her feet. I picked up the envelope. I still didn't invite her any farther inside. I appreciate that you apologized to him, I said. He deserved that. For a brief second, hope flashed across her face. I ended it immediately. But it doesn't change anything. Her lips parted. Ethan. No, I'm trying. And you should, I replied. For your daughter. For yourself. But not here. Fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. I love you. I looked directly into her eyes. If you really loved us, I said quietly, you never would have treated my son like he was negotiable. That was the sentence that ended everything. No screaming. No dramatic speeches. Just the truth. A truth that quietly closed the door on a future she destroyed with her own choices. She stood there for another second. Then she gave one slow nod, almost like someone finally accepting a sentence that couldn't be appealed. She turned around, walked outside, and took Haley's hand. My mother and Mrs. Carter stepped aside to let them pass. Before Mrs. Carter left, she looked at me with obvious regret. I owe Caleb an apology too. Yes, I answered. You do. She nodded once and quietly walked away. After everyone else had gone, my mother remained standing on the porch. I didn't expect that, she admitted. Neither did I. Do you think she meant it? I looked down at the envelope still sitting in my hand. Yeah, I said after a moment. I think she finally understood. I sighed. Too late. But yes. Mom reached over and gently touched my arm. You did the right thing. Maybe that was the real ending. Not Olivia kneeling on my floor. Not the envelope. Not even the apology. Maybe the real ending was realizing that, for the first time in my life, I didn't let sympathy erase healthy boundaries. The weeks that followed were much quieter than I'd expected. Caleb adjusted surprisingly fast. That told me he'd been carrying around far more stress than I'd ever realized. He laughed more. He slept through the night again. He stopped studying my face before asking if he could have something. Watching those little changes filled me with relief. It also made me feel guilty, because it meant peace didn't return until someone left. I used the money to buy Caleb everything he actually needed. Once his wardrobe was finally complete, I put the extra cash into an envelope in my dresser. Across the front I wrote, Caleb only. My mother has a new rule now. If she ever gives money for Caleb again, she hands it directly to me while other people are standing there. We joke that it's our new anti-fraud policy. As for Olivia, mutual friends eventually told me she'd moved in with her sister for a while, picked up a second job, and started fighting for a more stable custody arrangement with Haley. Honestly, I hope she gets her life together. Not because I want her back. That door is permanently closed. But children deserve adults who are willing to grow. About 2 months later, on a Friday night, Caleb and I were sitting in the living room eating pizza while a movie played in the background. He stretched his legs out in front of him and admired his sneakers. Not the first pair anymore. A newer pair, already scuffed from actually being worn by a kid who played outside. Dad. Yeah, buddy? He looked at me. Are we okay now? I looked back at him. At the pizza sauce on his chin. At the blanket covering his legs. At the tiny wrinkle between his eyebrows that only appeared whenever he was asking something important. And I realized that was the real question he'd been asking all along. Not about shoes. Not about Olivia. Not about school. He was asking whether we were finally safe. I set my pizza down. Yeah, buddy, I said. We're okay now. He smiled, leaned against me, and that was enough. For a long time, I believed being a good man meant quietly carrying every burden. Working longer hours. Forgiving people faster. Keeping the peace no matter what it cost me. Now I see it differently. Being a good father means teaching my son that love should never require humiliation. It means showing him that manipulation isn't the same thing as family. It means making sure he grows up understanding that when someone steals from you, lies to you, and makes you feel small, you don't call that compromise. You call it exactly what it is. And then you close the door. My name is Ethan. I drive a taxi. I work nights, lose sleep, and count every dollar more than once before I spend it. But the one thing my son knows without a doubt is that I believe him. After everything we've been through, that's worth a whole lot more than $1,800.